The convoy rolled through Pennsylvania darkness at 3 in the morning. Headlights carving tunnels through fog that hugged Route 22 like a shroud. 3 black SUVs, corporate plates, no escort. The kind of transport that screamed, "We're hauling something we shouldn't be hauling," to anyone with half a brain and access to satellite imagery. Inside the lead vehicle, Dr. Marcus Chen clutched a titanium briefcase to his chest like it might save him. It wouldn't. The case contained tissue samples and encrypted drives, remnants of the Woods virus project, the work Edison Cardoza had started before Dean Shetty got ambitious about airborne transmission rates. Chen had been smart enough to grab insurance before the whole operation went dark. Smart enough to know what Vought would pay to bury this, or what certain interested parties would pay to leverage it. Not smart enough to drive faster. The Space Hog dropped from cloud cover without warning. No engine roar, no descent burn, just gravity and intention. It hit the lead SUV's hood at terminal velocity, crushing the engine block into the asphalt and flipping the entire vehicle end over end. Metal screamed. Glass became shrapnel. The convoy's rear vehicles slammed brakes, fishtailing across both lanes. Lobo stepped off his bike before it had finished settling, boots crunching on safety glass. Pale skin caught moonlight like something dredged from a morgue. Black leather creaked as he rolled his shoulders, surveying the wreckage with the casual interest of a butcher checking livestock. The chained hook at his belt swung lazily. Right then, his voice carried that particular flavor of violence, amused, eager, already bored with whatever resistance might come. Shopping list says one scientist breathing preferred but negotiable. Data storage intact, mandatory. The main man's on a schedule, lads. Security poured from the rear vehicles. Vought contractors, black tactical gear. The kind of mercenary talent that made 6 figures protecting pharma executives and superhuman assets. They'd been briefed on Soup's Compound V profiles, power classifications, tactical response matrices. Standard Vought paranoia. They hadn't been briefed on aliens. The first contractor managed to raise his AR before Lobo's hook took him in the sternum, punching through Kevlar like tissue paper. The chain sang as Lobo yanked, using the dying man's momentum to clothesline 2 more. Efficient. Practiced. The kind of muscle memory you got from centuries of bounty work across star systems where life was cheap and contracts were gospel. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flash strobed the fog. Lobo walked through it, grinning, letting rounds punch into leather and flesh. Blood welled. Wounds closed. He caught one contractor by the throat, mid-reload, lifted him. Casual squeezed until vertebrae popped like bubble wrap. "See, here's what your Vought overlords didn't tell you." Lobo dropped the corpse casual. "They've been selling you superpowers in a needle, yeah, nice racket. But out in the real black past, Jupiter's arsehole and into the deep end." He grabbed another contractor, headbutted him hard enough that the man's face cratered. "We got the genuine article, baby. No lab coats required." The last security officer broke and ran. Lobo let him get 5 steps before the hook caught him in the spine, dragged him back screaming across gravel and glass. The screaming stopped quick. Chen had crawled from the wreckage, briefcase still clutched, leaving a blood trail from his shattered leg. He looked up at Lobo with the stunned incomprehension of a man whose worldview had just been kicked in the teeth by something that shouldn't exist. Lobo crouched casual, pulling out a crumpled piece of actual paper, honest-to-God dead tree. Because that's how old-school contractors did business. Dr. Marcus Chen, formerly of Godolphin University's Woods facility, currently running with viral bioweapons that target Compound V markers. My client wants the strain data and your professional expertise. Says here, he squinted at the contract. Alive preferred for interrogation, but brain intact is the hard minimum. Chen's mouth worked. No sound came out. Yeah, I get that reaction a lot. Lobo grabbed the briefcase, popped it open with one hand. Inside, blood samples in cryo storage, 3 encrypted solid-state drives, documentation with Vought letterhead and Shetty signature. Your planet's got an interesting gig going. Selling godhood retail, then cooking up genocide insurance when your products get uppity. Very American. I respect the hustle. He hauled Chen up by his collar, dragging him toward the space hog. The bike idled, engine purring, something that wasn't quite combustion, headlight painting the massacre in harsh white light. Client didn't specify who they were. Lobo said conversational, securing Chen to the bike's cargo rack with casual brutality. Just paid half up front in gold. Actual gold, none of this crypto nonsense, and promised the other half on delivery. Smart money says someone wants leverage on your Vought tower types. Maybe internal politics, maybe competition. Don't particularly care. He straddled the bike, gunned the engine. I'm just here for the paycheck and the entertainment value. The space hog lifted vertical anti-grav, kicking fog into spirals. Chen screamed as G-forces hit, but Lobo had already tuned him out, scanning his HUD for the secondary objective coordinates. The contract specified delivery to a dead drop in New York, Manhattan, naturally, because apparently every significant event on this backwater planet happened within 50 miles of that oversized island. As they climbed through cloud layer, Lobo caught sight of something in the distance, a massive skyscraper lit up like a beacon, corporate logo blazing. 7 Tower, Vought International's monument to vertical integration and merchandised godhood. He grinned, all teeth and terrible intentions. Yeah, he said to the wind and the whimpering scientist and the America spreading beneath him like a disease looking for treatment. This is going to be fun. Behind them, the convoy burned. The bodies would be discovered in 4 hours. Vaught's cleanup crews would arrive in 6, scrubbing the scene with the practiced efficiency of a corporation that had buried worse. And somewhere in a tower office, someone would pull Chen's file, see the Woods connection, and realize they had a problem that couldn't be solved with NDAs and damage control. Somewhere in the dark, the contract was already paying dividends. The main man had arrived. The emergency alert hit Vought Tower's executive suite at 4:47 a.m., 17 minutes after the Pennsylvania convoy stopped transmitting. Ashley Barrett had been awake anyway. Insomnia and strategic paranoia kept complimentary schedules scrolling through overnight social media sentiment, when her secure phone lit up with the kind of red notification that meant someone's career was about to end badly. She was in the war room by 5 tablet, already pulling preliminary reports. The space had that particular sterile menace of corporate crisis management glass walls, leather chairs, screens displaying real-time data feeds from 100 compromised news sources and internal monitoring systems. Coffee burned in her gut. Her fingers moved across the tablet with the manic efficiency of someone who knew delay meant unemployment or worse. By 5:15, the room had filled with the machinery of damage control. Legal sat left 3 attorneys in suits that cost more than most people's cars, already drafting contingency NDAs. Security operations had the opposite wall, ex-military contractors who'd graduated from shooting people to managing the people who shot people. PR occupied the center, Ashley's domain where truth went to die and narratives were born. The screens flickered. Satellite footage appeared, the convoy, thermal signatures, fading to ambient bodies, cooling in neat geometric patterns that suggested professional work. Then the anomaly heat signature that registered off-scale, moving vertical at impossible speed. Tell me that's one of ours. Ashley's voice carried that brittle quality. She'd perfected the sound of someone perpetually 3 minutes from a breakdown. but too caffeinated to actually collapse. Marcus Chen from Security Ops shook his head. He'd borrowed the name from the abducted scientist by coincidence. Vought employed enough people that overlap was inevitable. Negative. We've pinged every soup on payroll. The 7 are accounted for. Regional teams check clean. This signature doesn't match any known compound phi profile. Fuck. Ashley stabbed at her tablet, pulling up bioscan data. The convoy had been equipped with standard threat assessment gear sensors designed to detect and classify superhuman biological markers. The readout made her stomach drop. No V markers, 0. It's reading as completely outside our catalog parameters. Legal leaned forward a woman named Patricia, whose job was finding loopholes in reality itself. Outside parameters, how enhanced baseline human foreign asset with alternate enhancement, outside as in not from our product line. Security Ops pulled up molecular analysis, what little the convoy's dying sensors had captured. Cellular structure is wrong. Regeneration factor clocking higher than anything we've synthesized. This isn't Compound V. This isn't our science. The room went quiet in that way boardrooms do when everyone simultaneously realizes they're not in control. Ashley felt the familiar calculus clicking through her head, the same arithmetic that had kept Vaught's stock price climbing while they buried scandals that would have torched any other corporation. Unknown variables were dangerous. Unknown variables with body counts were catastrophic. But unknown variables that generated buzz. Options. She looked around the table. We don't know what this is, but it killed a convoy, grabbed our scientist, and presumably has access to Wood's project data. What's our play? Legal spoke first naturally. Immediate disavowal. The convoy was unauthorized contractor movement. We deny knowledge, blame rogue elements, threaten litigation against anyone suggesting corporate involvement. That's defense. Ashley shook her head. I'm asking about offense. This thing is going to surface. When it does do, we want to be reactive, or do we want to own the narrative? Security Ops frowned. You want to PR a threat we don't understand. We PR threats we don't understand every goddamn week. Ashley pulled up Homelander's latest approval ratings, still strong despite, or perhaps because of the constant edge of barely contained violence. We sell fear as strength. We package brutality as patriotism. Hell, we turned herogasm into a brand safety exercise. This is what we do. Patricia from Legal steepled her fingers, that predatory lawyer look. You're suggesting we flip this, make it an asset. I'm suggesting we find out what it wants. Ashley started typing orders flowing to subordinate teams. It took Chen and the data. That's targeted, professional. It's not random destruction, it's a contractor completing a job, which means someone hired it. Someone with deep pockets and specific knowledge of our Woods pipeline. Security Ops added, catching the thread. Internal leak or competitor intel. Either way, they paid for a service. Ashley's mind was racing now, that particular brand of immoral creativity that had earned her the job. We find out who hired it, we find leverage. And in the meantime, we prepare the publicity machine. If this thing goes public before we've secured it, we need a story ready that makes Vought the victim and the hero simultaneously. You want to negotiate with the thing that just killed 20 of our contractors? Security sounded incredulous. I want options. Ashley locked eyes with him. Vought doesn't survive by fighting every threat head-on. We survive by co-opting them. We make threats into assets. We turn enemies into employees. We've done it with soups who've killed dozens. Why not this? The logic was grotesque and perfectly sound, which made it quintessentially Vought. Legal started drafting contact protocols. Security began building a threat profile from the limited data. PR spun up focus groups to test narrative angles. Alien savior, interdimensional peacekeeper. Enhanced asset from classified program, take your pick. Then the alert came in biometric match on the abducted scientist. Dr. Marcus Chen's implanted tracker, all Woods personnel, had them insurance against defection, was pinging from Manhattan airspace heading downtown. Toward the tower. Ashley felt something cold settle in her chest. It's coming here. Not necessarily. Security started. It's coming here, she repeated sharper. Chen has the data. The data is leverage. You don't grab leverage and run, you bring it to market. She stood already moving. Get Homelander. Homelander's not exactly known for restraint. I don't want restraint. Ashley was at the door tablet clutched like a weapon. I want the biggest, loudest, most American response we can deploy. Whatever this thing is, it needs to understand that on Earth, in America, Vought owns the monopoly on power. We don't negotiate from weakness. Behind her, the war room erupted into coordinated chaos. Orders flying, teams mobilizing. The machinery of corporate crisis management grinding into motion with the smooth efficiency of long practice. In the elevator down to Homelander's penthouse suite, Ashley allowed herself 3 seconds of genuine fear. They were about to poke something they didn't understand with their most volatile asset. The smart play was containment and observation. But Vought had never made money on smart plays. They made money on spectacle. The elevator doors opened. She stepped into Homelander's domain, all white leather and American flags and barely concealed narcissism, and found him already awake watching news feeds on the wall of screens, blue eyes reflecting the glow. He turned that trademark smile that never reached his eyes. Ashley, you look like someone just fucked up your quarterly projections. We have a situation, she said, and hated how her voice shook. Something new. Something that's not ours. And it's coming here. The smile wide and genuine now. Dangerous. The look of a predator who'd been bored for far too long. Good, Homelander said. I was getting tired of playing nice with the merchandise. 23 floors below in the tower's scanning suite technicians were picking up the signature now. Descending, fast. The alien reading growing stronger as it approached, burning through their sensors like something that shouldn't exist, but very clearly did. The contract was about to meet corporate America's flagship product. Neither was going to like what came next. The Space Hog touched down on Seven Towers' rooftop landing pad at 6:42 a.m., exactly the time when Manhattan's skyline shifted from night purple to that particular urban gray that passed for dawn. Lobo killed the engine, surveyed the architecture, all glass and steel and corporate ego rendered in vertical, and laughed. Corporate Death Star, he muttered, unstrapping the whimpering Chen from the cargo rack. Every planet's got one. Different logos, same disease. The rooftop was pristine. Helipad markings fresh enough to smell like paint. Observation deck with telescope installations for tourists who wanted to feel close to their manufactured gods. And naturally, cameras. Dozens of them tracking his arrival, with the hungry focus of a media apparatus that never slept. Lobo waved at the nearest lens. Grinned like a shark that had just smelled blood in executive bathwater. The rooftop access door exploded outward. Homelander emerged through smoke and shattered steel cape billowing in rotor wash from some news helicopter already circling like a vulture. The suit caught morning light stars and stripes and all that performative patriotism Americans loved. and he landed 10 feet away with that theatrical precision Soups always used when cameras were rolling. "You're trespassing." Homelander's voice carried that practiced authority, the sound of someone who'd never been told no and didn't plan to start now. "This is private property. Vought International owns this airspace, this building, and as of about 6 seconds ago, your immediate future." Lobo cocked his head, genuinely amused. The pitch. You own the sky," he spat casual. "Mate, I've been to 40 systems where they actually tried enforcing that. Built whole fleets around it. They're all space dust now, and I'm still collecting paychecks." The smile on Homelander's face flickered. Just for a second, that micro-expression of someone encountering resistance where there should be worship. His eyes began to glow that telltale red, warming up behind blue. "I don't know what third-rate villain convention you escaped from," Homelander said, stepping closer. "But on Earth in America, I'm the hero. And heroes don't negotiate with—" Lobo dropped, chin casual. The scientist crumpled, forgotten. "You talk a lot for someone who ain't landed a punch yet." The laser vision hit like concentrated Starfire twin beams that could cut steel vaporized concrete punch through tank armor. Homelander poured it on full power, the kind of display that had melted insurgents and demolished buildings, and reminded everyone why Vought's flagship product was worth the premium price point. Lobo stood in the beam leather, smoking skin blackening, and yawned. "Yeah, that's warm," he said through the energy assault. "Like a nice sunburn. You got anything past the light show, or is this the whole act?" Homelander cut the beams, genuine confusion flickering across his face. The blackened skin on Lobo's torso was already knitting back together, cellular regeneration happening in real time fast enough to watch. Char flaking away to reveal gray flesh beneath, undamaged, unbothered. "What the hell are you?" Homelander's voice had lost that smooth authority, gained an edge of something uglier. "Zarnian. Last of actually long story involving genocide and a science project gone beautifully wrong." Lobo cracked his neck, rolling shoulders. "But more importantly, I'm the bloke who just made you look like a sparkler at a fireworks show. How's that feel, Captain America's discount bastard?" The punch came fast, superhuman speed, enough force to crater concrete. Homelander's fist connected with Lobo's jaw, snapped his head. Sideways broke bone with an audible crack that the news helicopter's boom mic definitely caught. Lobo's head swiveled back, jaw already realigning, grin wider. "My turn." He moved. Not superhuman fast Zarnians didn't do speed, but with the inevitable momentum of a freight train that had spotted something it wanted to destroy. His fist caught Homelander in the sternum, lifted America's hero off his feet, sent him crashing through the observation deck's reinforced glass. The cameras loved it. Every lens, every angle catching the moment their golden boy became mortal. Lobo followed through the shattered glass boots, crunching on debris. Homelander was already up, face twisted into something that looked nothing like the billboard smile. Blood at his lip, actual blood, probably the first he'd bled in years outside of carefully controlled PR photos. "You wanted a show?" Lobo spread his arms, playing to the cameras, still rolling. "Let's give the people what they paid for." They collided in the center of the observation deck, trading blows that shattered support pillars and cracked reinforced flooring. Homelander fought with precision, leveraging flight and laser vision, years of Vought combat training, designed to look good on camera while maximizing lethality. Lobo fought like something that had survived wars across galaxies, dirty and efficient and utterly unconcerned with aesthetics. He caught Homelander's next laser blast with his palm, let it burn through to bone, then grabbed the hero's face with the ruined hand and headbutted him hard enough that the impact echoed across Midtown. Homelander staggered. The mighty, the untouchable, actually staggered. "Here's the thing about you corporately engineered messiahs," Lobo said, circling now, playing it up. "You're built for worship, not warfare. You pose for magazines and save cats from trees and smile for the cameras. But you ain't never fought something that actually wants to hurt you, something that enjoys it." He could have killed him. The opening was there. Homelander dazed defenses, compromised, neck exposed. One chain hook to the spine, one good pull, and America's hero becomes America's expensive corpse. But the contract with Butcher unsigned. But negotiations were pending, had specific language about Homelander's mortality timeline. And Lobo had his code. Once you agreed to terms, you honored them. Even implied terms. Even terms you were still dickering over. So instead of killing Lobo, grabbed Homelander by the cape, swung him like a club into the nearest support column, then held him there, palm against chest, casual, demonstrating the gulf in their respective food chains. "Tell your handlers," Lobo said, quiet enough that only Homelander could hear under the helicopter noise, "that the main man's open to negotiation. I got business on this rock. They got resources I want. We can dance this dance civilized-like, or I can keep making you bleed in high definition until your approval rating tanks harder than your ego." He shoved, sending Homelander sliding across debris. Stood. Turned to the cameras still recording, gave them a salute that was 3 parts mockery to 1 part threat. Then he walked back through the shattered observation deck, grabbed the barely conscious Chen, mounted his space hog, and launched vertical, leaving Homelander kneeling in wreckage, surrounded by broken glass and shattered narrative. 23 floors below, Ashley watched the live feeds and felt something between horror and opportunity calcifying in her chest. Every news network had caught it. Social media was already exploding. Homelander, untouchable, invincible. America's last defense had been battered like a child's toy. The PR nightmare was catastrophic. The engagement numbers were through the roof. Her phone buzzed. Upper management, naturally. She answered with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd survived worse. "We're seeing this," the voice said. No preamble. Senior VP of Brand Integration, probably already running damage models. "The good news," Ashley said, fingers already typing, "is that Homelander's alive and we can spin this. The bad news is whatever that thing is, it's not going away. And it just made our flagship product look like a knockoff." "Then make it our product." The VP's voice had that particular vaught quality, the sound of someone looking at catastrophe and seeing market opportunity. "Find out what it wants, find out what it costs, and get me a meeting." The line went dead. Ashley looked at the screens. Lobo's space hog was already gone, vanished into morning traffic. But the footage remained. Would remain. Forever probably viral, mimetic, the kind of cultural moment that shifted paradigms. Homelander's invincibility had been Vaught's primary asset. Their core narrative, the foundation of a market cap that ran into 11 figures. And some alien bounty hunter had just cracked that foundation on live television. She pulled up contact protocols, started drafting outreach. They needed to turn this threat into an asset before it turned into an extinction event. On the rooftop, Homelander stood slowly, cape-torn suit, scuffed blood drying on his perfect face. The cameras had finally backed off, news helicopters retreating to safe distance, respecting the visual they'd captured. He stared at the skyline, jaw working, blue eyes burning with something that wasn't heat vision, but might be worse. For the first time in years, maybe ever, Homelander had lost. The world had watched him lose. And somewhere in his perfectly engineered brain, something shifted. Something that would have consequences Vought couldn't PR away. The crown had fallen. The footage was already trending. The meet happened in a Brooklyn warehouse that smelled like rust and old blood. The kind of location that had seen enough questionable business that one more wouldn't register. Butcher arrived 20 minutes early, standard tradecraft, checked sightlines, exits, and came to the professional conclusion that if this went sideways, he was probably dead. He was okay with that arithmetic. Had been for years. Lobo arrived exactly on time, dropping through the skylight in a shower of safety glass because apparently doors were for amateurs. The Space Hog hovered outside, engine idling with a sound that definitely violated several laws of physics and probably a few noise ordinances. Punctual, Butcher said, not moving from where he leaned against a support column. I appreciate that in hired muscle. Punctual and profitable. Lobo landed with boots that cratered concrete casual. He looked Butcher over with the assessing eye of someone who'd sized up thousands of marks across as many worlds. You're the one been asking around. Butcher, yeah, heard you got a hard-on for cape types that borders on psychiatric. Heard you just made Homelander bleed on live television. Butcher pulled out a phone, pulled up the footage that had racked up 40 million views in 6 hours. Also heard you could have killed him, but didn't. That suggests either weakness or leverage. I'm betting leverage. Lobo grinned all teeth. Smart lad, I don't do charity kills. Every death's gotta pay dividends immediate or down the line. Which brings us to business. Butcher pocketed the phone, produced a tablet instead. I've got a proposal. You've got talents Vought can't buy and I can't replicate. I've got resources and a target list that aligns with what I'm guessing is your very flexible moral compass. Keep talking. I charge by the minute for consultation, but the first 5 are free. Butcher pulled up files. The boys accumulated intelligence on Vought financials, blackmail material supply chains for Compound V and Temp Vive locations of storage facilities that officially didn't exist. Then the real prize preliminary data on the soup-killing virus, what little Butcher had managed to piece together from leaks and informants who'd gotten too curious about the woods. Vought's built an empire selling superpowers, Butcher said. But empires need insurance policies. They've been developing a bioweapon targets the specific genetic markers left by Compound Vi. Kills, soups, dead, leaves regular humans untouched. It's their nuclear option for if their product line ever goes rogue. Lobo whistled low and impressed. Genocide insurance. Classy. Let me guess you want it. I want access to it. Want to know where it's stored, who controls it, and how to deploy it when the time comes. Butcher met Lobo's eyes unflinching. And I want Homelander alive until I say otherwise. That's the contract. You get paid in Vought's toys, their V compounds, their tech, their resources. Plus cash, naturally. I've got access to accounts Vought thinks are secure. And what's stopping me from just taking what I want and leaving you with a corpse and a bill? Butcher smiled, sharp and ugly. Because I'm offering you something better than loot. I'm offering you sanctioned chaos. A license to operate on Earth with legal cover, media protection, and a target-rich environment. Vought will try to co-opt you already, or probably. They'll offer money, branding, merchandising rights. Turn you into another product. Not interested in being someone's action figure? Exactly. Which is why you want a competitor bidding. Butcher pulled up contracts, actual legal documents, drafted by lawyers who specialized in the kind of work that never saw courtrooms. I'm not asking you to be a hero. I'm asking you to be a contractor. You do the work, get paid, and when this is over, You leave Earth with enough wealth to buy a solar system and the satisfaction of watching corporate America eat itself. Lobo read the contract. Actually read it, eyes scanning fine print, with the attention of someone who'd been burned by legal language before. Clause 7 says I can't terminate Homelander until you give explicit authorization. Clause 12 says if I violate that, payment defaults, and you release my biometric data to every intelligence agency on the planet. Can't have you going off script, Butcher said. Homelander dies when I say he dies. Not before, not after. You can beat him, bloody humiliate him, make him cry for his mummy, I don't care. But he stays breathing until I've got the virus and the leverage to make sure his death actually means something. You're using me as bait. I'm using you as a hammer. Vought responds to threats by trying to control them. You're uncontrollable, which makes you valuable. They'll scramble offer deals, expose weaknesses trying to secure you. And while they're focused on the loud alien smashing their flagship product, I'm in the shadows grabbing their real weapons. Lobo was quiet for a moment, thinking. The calculations weren't complex. He'd run similar plays on a dozen worlds. Corporate entities always had the same vulnerability. They valued control over chaos, which meant chaos had inherent worth. Payment structure, he asked. Butcher pulled up financials. 10 million upfront cash, access to Vought's temp vice stockpiles. I know you don't need it, but it trades well in the right markets. Tech access to their R&D weapons vehicles, whatever you can carry. And the big prize when I get the virus, you get a sample. Full genome sequence delivery mechanism, everything. That's leverage anywhere in the universe where enhanced beings exist. And if you die before payment, dead man switch, everything transfers to an account accessible only by a biometric signature yours. My death makes you rich and gives you the data. Keeps me motivated to stay alive, keeps you motivated to keep me that way. The logic was sound. Ugly transactional built on mutual self-interest and the assumption that both parties were bastards, but sound. Lobo pulled out an actual pen. Not a stylus, not a digital signature, an honest-to-God writing implement that probably cost more than the warehouse. I sign this, you own my schedule until contract completion or your death. I don't work for you, I work with you. And if you try to weasel out of payment, I'll make Homelander's beating look like foreplay. Wouldn't dream of it. Butcher offered his hand. We have an accord. Lobo ignored the hand, signed the contract instead. His signature was surprisingly elegant for someone who looked like a biker gang's worst nightmare. We have a deal. Now tell me about the target list. Butcher pulled up files. Vought executives, 7 members' facilities that needed hitting. But the real prize sat at the center Homelander. Not dead, not yet. But systematically destroyed reputation power, the myth of invincibility. Death by 1,000 cuts, each one filmed, each one viral. He stays alive until I have the virus and the infrastructure to deploy it, Butcher repeated. But between now and then, you're authorized to make his life a living hell. Show the world their God bleeds. Break the illusion so thoroughly that when he finally dies, it's not martyrdom, it's pest control. Lobo's grin widened. You know what I like about you, Butcher? You think like a Zarnian. Revenge isn't a meal, it's a tasting menu. Then let's set the table. They spent the next hour planning. Targets, timing, escalation patterns. Butcher provided intelligence, Vaught's blind spots. Homelander's psychological pressure points the media cycles that would maximize damage. Lobo provided the muscle and the spectacle plus insights from 40 systems worth of corporate warfare. By the time they finished, Brooklyn morning had shifted to afternoon. The contract sat between them, signed, and sealed. A partnership built on hatred and greed and the mutual understanding that sometimes burning down the world was the only honest work available. Butcher pocketed the tablet. First targets tomorrow. Vaught's staging a PR event, Lobo Saves America campaign, trying to co-opt you. They'll have cameras, civilians, the full propaganda machine. Let me guess you want me to play along, then improvise. I want you to remind them what they're actually dealing with. Butcher headed for the exit, stopped at the door. They'll try to script you control the narrative. Show them why that's impossible. Make it messy. Make it real. Make it the kind of content their PR team can't spin. Lobo watched him go, then looked down at the contract. The fine print was beautiful in its viciousness clauses, within clauses, loopholes that weren't really loopholes. Language so tight that even a Sarnian's traditional flexibility couldn't squeeze through. He'd honored worse deals for worse pay. And honestly, this was going to be fun. The Space Hog's engine roared to life outside. Lobo mounted up, contract secured in his jacket target list, loaded into his HUD. Tomorrow, Vought would try to make him a hero. He'd show them what heroes looked like when they stopped pretending. The production meeting happened at 6 a.m. in a Times Square soundstage that Vought had rented for the day at a cost that could have fed a small nation. Ashley stood at the front tablet, glowing, surrounded by producers, camera operators, legal consultants, and a crisis counselor on retainer, because someone upstairs thought this might require therapy. All right, people. We're selling a narrative today. Ashley's voice had that manic brightness of someone running on prescription stimulants and pure corporate anxiety. Lobo, our new interdimensional asset, is going to demonstrate heroism. American heroism. We're framing him as Earth's newest protector, here to work alongside the Seven in defending freedom and democracy and whatever other keywords test well with the 18 to 49 demographic. A producer raised his hand. What if he goes off script? Then we cut to commercial and deploy the backup narrative that he's being mind-controlled by terrorists. Ashley didn't blink. We've got 6 different contingency stories loaded. The important thing is controlling the visuals. Heroism is 90% camera angles and 10% actually saving people. We do this right, Lobo becomes a brand. We do this wrong, he becomes a lawsuit. The set they'd built was pure propaganda theater. A mock city street with strategically placed civilians. Actors naturally all signed NDAs thicker than phone books. Fire effects ready to deploy. Breakaway walls designed to look impressive when smashed. And at the center, a cage holding 3 dangerous criminals, actually low-level soups from Vaught's private roster, promised bonuses and threatened with legal annihilation if they deviated from the script. Lobo arrived at 7:30, fashionably late, riding the Space Hog, straight through the soundstage's loading doors because apparently traffic patterns were suggestions. He dismounted, surveyed the set, and his laugh echoed off warehouse ceilings. This is your big play. He walked through the mock street kicking props. Plastic buildings and paid extras. You're not even trying to hide the bullshit. Ashley materialized at his elbow, smile welded in place. It's called controlled messaging. We show America what they want to see, a hero who follows rules and saves people photogenically. You get positive press, we get ratings, everyone wins. And if I don't feel like playing pretend today? The smile never wavered, but her eyes went sharp. Then we activate the crisis protocols, and tomorrow you're the villain in a story about domestic terrorism. Your choice. Be the hero we're selling or become the monster we're better at merchandising. Lobo considered this, amused. The contract with Butcher had specific language about maintaining operational freedom. This PR circus violated the spirit, while technically honoring the letter, which meant he had latitude to improvise. All right. He cracked his knuckles. Let's give the people a show. The cameras went live at 8 a.m. sharp, broadcasting to Vought's proprietary network and partnered media outlets. The intro was pure American excess dramatic music sweeping shots of the fake cityscape Ashley's voiceover, explaining how Lobo had arrived to protect Earth from extraterrestrial threats. Cue the crisis fire effects engaging the caged soups, breaking free civilians screaming on cue. The script called for Lobo to arrive heroically, subdue the threats with minimal collateral damage, then deliver a prepared statement about unity and protecting the American way. What actually happened was education in chaos theory. Lobo hit the first soup, a low-tier strongman type with enough force to send him through 3 breakaway walls that weren't supposed to break that way. The impact was real. The blood was real. The screaming definitely wasn't scripted. The second soup tried to fly. Lobo's chain hook caught him. Mid-ascent dragged him back down, and the landing cratered the soundstage floor hard enough that camera operators felt it through their boots. Ashley was shouting into her headset, "Cut to commercial! Cut to fucking commercial!" But the cameras kept rolling. Producers frozen. Because the ratings were spiking real-time, analytics showed viewership climbing faster than any scripted content had ever achieved. Violence, it turned out, was better television when it wasn't choreographed. The third soupy surrendered immediately, hands up, clearly breaking character. Lobo grabbed him anyway, held him up for the cameras like a trophy kill. "This what you call threats, this soft-serve corporate garbage." He threw the soup into the rescue zone, where actors playing grateful civilians scattered their terror, no longer requiring any acting ability whatsoever. Then Lobo turned to the camera, walked right up to the main broadcast unit close enough that his face filled the frame. Grinned that shark-tooth grin. "America, your handlers want me to feed you fairy tales about heroes and safety. Want me to smile and pose and pretend this," he gestured at the wreckage, the bleeding soups, the chaos, "is clean and noble and worth celebrating." His voice dropped intimate and vicious. "But see where I'm from. We call this what it is. Commerce. Violence packaged and sold to people too scared to admit they love watching things break." Ashley was screaming now, lawyers already drawing up damage control briefs, but the producers had made a calculation. This was too good to kill. The ratings were astronomical. Social media was exploding. Every hate watch and genuine fan was driving engagement numbers into territory that scripted content couldn't touch. Lobo pulled out a flask. Where he'd been keeping it was unclear. Took a drink, offered it to the camera. "So here's the real pitch, boys and girls. I'm not your hero. I'm not your villain. I'm the part of your sick little system that stopped pretending. And if you're smart, you'll remember that next time someone tries to sell you salvation with a logo on it." He walked off set. Just walked away while cameras tracked him, while Ashley had what appeared to be a minor stroke, while legal prepared for her 17 different liability strategies. Behind the set in the area marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The cleanup crews were already working. The 3 soups had been removed medical or morgue depending on how hard Lobo had hit. NDAs were being distributed like communion wafers. Witnesses were being coached on official statements that contradicted everything they'd actually seen. One crew member, a kid maybe 22, was dry heaving into a trash can. His supervisor put a hand on his shoulder, offered water, spoke in the dead monotone of someone who'd done this before. "First time seeing behind the curtain." The kid nodded, couldn't speak. "Gets easier. Or you quit. Those are the options." The supervisor checked his tablet, already getting work orders for the next crisis. "Vought pays well, and the NDA means you never talk about it. Small price for dental insurance and a 401k. In the production booth, Ashley watched playback footage while fielding calls from executives whose voices ranged from furious to calculatingly impressed. The content was unspinnable in traditional terms. Lobo had deliberately demolished their narrative framework. But the metrics didn't lie. This was the most watched VOT broadcast in 5 years. Do we have him for episode 2? Some VP, whose name she couldn't remember, already thinking in terms of series content. Ashley looked at the screen. Lobo had registered 63 million views in the first hour. The clip of him calling out American violence worship was being shared by everyone from anti-corporate activists to gun rights advocates to media critics. He'd become a Rorschach test. Everyone saw what they wanted in the chaos. He's under contract, she said. Which wasn't technically true, but would become true once legal finished drafting offers. We can build a whole campaign around him. Real heroes don't follow scripts or something. Lean into the authenticity angle. Make sure he doesn't actually kill anyone on camera next time. I'll add it to the rider. Ashley was already typing, brain shifting from crisis to opportunity with the fluid amorality that had earned her the position. Though honestly, the death speculation is probably driving half the engagement. The call ended. Ashley sat in the empty production booth, surrounded by screens showing the carnage from 17 different angles, and allowed herself exactly 10 seconds of genuine horror at what her job had become. Then she got back to work. By noon, the footage had been cut into 30 different promotional packages. Reaction videos were being commissioned. Focus groups were being assembled to test merchandise concepts. The machine had absorbed the chaos and was converting it into revenue streams. And somewhere in Brooklyn, Butcher watched the broadcast on a stolen laptop and smiled. Vought was doing exactly what he'd predicted, trying to monetize the monster instead of understanding it. They were so focused on making Lobo profitable that they weren't noticing the systematic dismantling of their control systems. The beauty of the play was its simplicity. Lobo wasn't destroying Vought. He was just being himself, and Vought was destroying itself, trying to profit from the destruction. Butcher pulled up his files on the woods. On the virus, on the infrastructure he'd need to access before this whole arrangement collapsed. The contract with Lobo had bought him time and distraction. Now he needed to use it. His phone buzzed. Probably calling to yell about collateral damage and ethical lines and all the things that made him good at what he did, but terrible at winning. Butcher let it go to voicemail. Some conversations required energy he didn't have, explanations he couldn't give. The team would understand when it was over. Or they wouldn't. Either way, the work came first. On screen, Lobo's face filled the frame mid-rant about corporate mythology, and Butcher raised his beer in salute to the alien bastard who understood the assignment better than anyone on Earth. "Cheers, you magnificent disaster," he said to the empty safehouse. "Keep the cameras rolling while I rob the bank." The show was just getting started. The samples arrived at Vought's R&D facility, officially designated Compound Research Alpha, unofficially called the Pipeline, because of its connection to Godolkin's underground operations at 2 a.m. in refrigerated transport that bore no corporate logos. Just serial numbers and biohazard warnings that would have sent any civilian investigator running for quarantine protocols. Dr. Sarah Vance signed for the delivery personally. Mid-40s credentials from Stanford and MIT that she'd spent the last decade using to commit atrocities for 7 figures annually. The kind of scientist who'd started with good intentions and found that moral flexibility paid better than ethics. She opened the container in the main lab, level B7, surrounded by containment fields and air filtration systems that cost more than most hospitals. Inside, tissue samples, blood specimens, and what appeared to be fragments of regenerated skin, all harvested from the Times Square soundstage after Lobo's performance. Cleanup crews had been thorough. Every drop of alien biology swept into storage for exactly this purpose. "Run the full panel," Vance told her team, already pulling up analysis protocols. "Genetic, sequencing, cellular structure, regenerative markers. I want to know what makes this thing tick." The initial scans came back within an hour, and the results made her pause. The cellular structure was wrong, fundamentally incompatible with anything terrestrial. DNA that followed patterns she'd never seen. Regeneration rates that violated every biological model Vought had developed from Compound 5 research. "It's not enhanced human," her assistant said unnecessarily. "It's not even close to our baseline, which means it's valuable." Vance was already planning the report she'd send upstairs. "Compound V works by modifying human genetic structures. This," she gestured at the scans, "this is pre-modified. A completely different evolutionary path. If we can isolate the regeneration mechanism, map it to something compatible with terrestrial biology." She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Everyone in the lab understood the implications. Vaught's entire business model relied on controlling the supply of superhuman enhancement. If they could reverse engineer alien biology, create a new product line that didn't rely on Compound V's increasingly problematic side effects, the profit potential was astronomical. The human cost was irrelevant. "Start the cultivation protocols," Vance ordered. "I want tissue cultures grown from these samples. And prep the test subjects will need live trials to see how this integrates with existing V-enhanced physiology." The test subjects were stored 3 levels down in the cells that officially didn't exist. Failed soup candidates, mostly people who'd volunteered for Godolkin trials and discovered too late that Vaught's definition of informed consent had loopholes large enough to drive semi-trucks through. Some had powers that manifested wrong. Others had rejected Compound 5 entirely, their bodies turning against the enhancement in ways that required medical intervention and lifetime NDAs. They were perfect for experimentation, already compromised, already owned, already damned. The first trial began at 4 a.m. Subject 7 Alpha, male, mid-20s, original enhancement had given him minor electrokinetic abilities and major organ damage. He'd been kept alive through Vought medical intervention, conscious, mostly because the sedation budget had limits. Vance injected the cultivated alien tissue directly into his bloodstream, monitoring vitals through the observation window. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then, his body started changing. The regeneration kicked in, first wounds that had been festering for months, suddenly closing, scar tissue dissolving. Subject 7. Alpha screamed, more surprise than pain, as his body rebuilt itself at visible speed. Then the mutation started. The alien cells didn't integrate. They conquered, spreading through his system like cancer, but faster, rewriting genetic code in real time. His skin took on a grayish cast, similar to Lobo's coloring. His muscle mass increased violently, bones breaking and reforming to accommodate new density. The electrokinetic abilities he'd possessed began glitching electricity, arcing, wild, uncontrolled burning through restraints and scorching the observation glass. "Sedate him," Vance ordered, but the medical team was already moving injectors, deploying sedatives designed for superhuman metabolisms. The drugs did nothing. Subject 7 Alpha's enhanced regeneration was burning through them faster than they could take effect. He tore free from the remaining restraints, stood on legs that shouldn't have been able to support his new mass, and looked directly at the observation window. His eyes had changed. No longer human. Something else looking through borrowed meat. Then his body collapsed inward, cellular structure failing catastrophically. The regeneration that had rebuilt him turned cannibalistic, attacking healthy tissue, consuming itself in a feedback loop that medical science had no framework to address. Within 90 seconds, Subject 7 Alpha had liquefied flesh and bone, dissolving into biological slurry that containment protocols barely managed to isolate. The lab went silent, except for ventilation systems, scrubbing the air and the soft beeping of monitors confirming what everyone could see. Complete system failure. Not death, something worse. Biological negation. Vance stared at the containment cell, at the residue that had been a person, and felt something she hadn't experienced in years working for Vought. Not guilt, she'd burned that out long ago. Fear. "Log it as Trial 1 failure," she said, voice steady through professional discipline. "Prep Subject 7 Beta. We need to adjust the integration ratios." Her assistant looked at her like she'd suggested setting the building on fire. "Doctor, the sample is clearly incompatible with V-enhanced physiology. We just watched someone dissolve, which means we need better data." Vance was already pulling up genetic models, making calculations. The regeneration worked. For almost 2 minutes, we had successful tissue integration. That's proof of concept. We just need to refine the delivery mechanism, control the mutation cascade. Or we could stop. Vance turned genuinely confused by the suggestion. "Stop. We have samples from an extraterrestrial biological system that demonstrates regenerative capabilities beyond anything Compound 5 has achieved. Do you understand what that's worth? What it represents? A person just died. A failed soup died. Someone who signed their life over to Vought the moment they accepted trial enrollment." Vance pulled up the consent forms, all the legal architecture that made this technically permissible. Everyone in those cells downstairs is corporate property. That's the arrangement. We provide medical care, they provide data. It's efficient. The assistant didn't respond, but Vance could see it in her expression, that moment when someone realizes exactly what they've become part of. It happened to everyone eventually working in the pipeline. You either accepted it or you didn't, and the ones who didn't tended to have short tenures and aggressive NDA enforcement. "Prep the next trial," Vance repeated, "and this time dilute the sample. 10% alien tissue, 90% neutral medium. We'll titrate up from there." The experiments continued through the night. Subject 7 Beta, 7 Gamma, 7 Delta. Each trial refined each failure, documented each death, logged under research protocols that would never see external review. Some subjects lasted longer than others. A few showed promising integration before the cascade failures started. One made it almost 5 minutes with stable regeneration before his circulatory system rejected the foreign biology and he bled out from the inside. The data accumulated. The body count rose, and somewhere in the biological chaos, fragments of Lobo's genetic material were adapting, mutating, finding purchase in ways that weren't immediately visible on the monitoring equipment. By dawn, Vance had enough data to write her preliminary report. The alien samples were incompatible with direct integration, but showed potential for supplementary enhancement. Recommend continued trials with modified protocols and expanded test population. She sent the report upstairs where executives would read it over coffee and calculate whether the potential profit justified the research costs. They'd approve naturally. Vought always approved when the pitch involved extending their market advantage. What Vance didn't include in the report, what she hadn't noticed in her focus on the obvious failures, was the contamination spreading through the lab's closed-loop air systems. Microscopic fragments of mutated tissue aerosolized during the more violent deaths, bypassing filters designed for terrestrial pathogens. The alien biology was adapting, learning, finding vectors that Vaught's safety protocols hadn't been designed to catch. And in the specimens, still in cold storage, still viable, still waiting for analysis, something was changing. Cellular structures reorganizing, not dying, evolving. Lobo's regeneration wasn't just fast, it was aggressive, competitive. And it didn't stop at death. It resented death, fought it, found ways around it through sheer biological stubbornness, cultivated over eons of Zarnian evolution. The samples Vought thought they controlled were learning their new environment, adapting to containment, preparing in the slow way of cellular intelligence to become something new. By 8 a.m., Vance had moved to the next phase testing. Whether the contaminated tissue could be weaponized, whether it could serve as a delivery mechanism for more controlled enhancements. She didn't notice when the first contamination alarm triggered in Sector C. Didn't see the readings showing cellular activity in supposedly dead samples. The pipeline had been designed to contain biological threats, but it had been designed around terrestrial assumptions, human parameters, the physics of Earth-based life. Lobo's biology operated under different rules, and rules when misunderstood became vulnerabilities. The lab worked through the morning confident in their containment, their protocols, their control. Below them in cold storage and filtration systems in the very air they breathed, something alien was taking root. The cultivated evil they'd intended to harvest was cultivating them right back. The breach happened at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which meant maximum civilian exposure and minimum containment options, not an accident. Whoever triggered the release had studied crowd patterns, media cycles, optimal chaos, multiplication. Professional work. Later investigators would trace it to a compromised ventilation system in Vought Tower's public atrium. The soup-killing virus, refined through years of Wood's research, and Cardoza's reluctant genius, introduced to circulation via maintenance access that security had deemed low priority. By the time alarms triggered, the pathogen had dispersed through 17 floors and into Manhattan's HVAC-connected grid. The first casualty was a C-list soup doing a meet and greet on the tower's 3rd floor. Flight capability, minor enhanced strength, the kind of hero Vought deployed for mall appearances and school assemblies. She was mid-autograph when the coughing started, wet, violent blood speckling the promotional photos spread across the table. She collapsed in front of 43 civilians and 12 cameras. Live streamed to 70,000 followers who watched her convulse. Watched her powers glitch out as the virus attacked the compound. Phi markers in her bloodstream watched her die in high definition with brand logos visible in the background. The footage went viral faster than the pathogen. Within an hour, reports flooded emergency services. Soups across Manhattan showing symptoms, respiratory distress, power fluctuations, hemorrhaging. The virus was discriminating, surgical in its targeting. Civilians remained unaffected, walking past dying heroes with the confusion of people watching gods bleed. Vaught's crisis response deployed immediately. But they were coordinating damage control for something they'd created and lost control of. The irony was noted by approximately no one in the executive suite currently trying to prevent stock price collapse. Ashley was in her 14th consecutive emergency call when the reports about Lobo came through. He's what? She pulled up security footage, disbelieving. The feed showed Lobo in Brooklyn, mid-confrontation with some street-level crew stupid enough to think alien meant vulnerable. He'd been handling them with his usual efficiency, breaking bones, dispensing violence like party favors, when he'd stopped mid-swing, staggered. The regeneration that made him functionally immortal was glitching. Wounds that should have closed in seconds stayed open, bleeding. His movement lost that casual invincibility, gained the slower rhythm of someone actually feeling pain. The contamination from the lab trials? Vance's voice crackled over the emergency channel, clinical even in crisis. The mutated tissue fragments that spread through our air systems. They're in him now, interacting with the virus in ways we didn't predict. He's not immune, he's just operating on a different timeline. Ashley felt something cold settle in her chest. How long until he's neutralized? Unknown. His baseline regeneration is fighting the contamination, but it's resource-intensive. He's weak and vulnerable in ways he hasn't been since arriving on Earth. But calling him neutralized would be... The feed cut to static, as Lobo, even weakened, demonstrated exactly what Zarnian biology could accomplish when genuinely irritated. The street crew stopped being a threat and started being anatomy lessons. But the important data point remained: Lobo could be hurt now. Actually hurt. The alien who'd made Homelander bleed was bleeding himself, and the implications were cascading through Vought's strategic planning faster than the virus spread through the city. On the streets, Manhattan was fracturing into zones of chaos that police and military weren't equipped to contain. Soups dying in public spaces, their bodies becoming biohazard sites that required quarantine. Civilians evacuating, panicking, some celebrating the downfall of their manufactured gods with the ugly enthusiasm of people who'd been afraid for too long. And the other response, the violent one. Because some people loved their heroes enough to kill for them. And when those heroes started dying, someone needed to pay. Vigilante groups formed in real time, organized through social media, hunting for whoever had released the virus. Their logic was simple and wrong, but crowds rarely waited for accurate information before committing atrocities. Butcher watched it unfold from a safe house in Queens, monitoring 17 different news feeds and twice as many encrypted channels. The virus deployment had been elegant. Someone inside Vought with access and grudge, probably. Didn't matter who. What mattered was the chaos providing exactly the cover he needed. His phone buzzed. Probably with objections about civilian casualties and moral boundaries. Butcher sent it to voicemail, focused on the tablet displaying Vought's internal security protocols. The tower was in lockdown, but lockdown meant predictable patterns, which meant exploitable vulnerabilities. The virus was the distraction. The real target was still the source, the original strains, the research data, everything Cardoza had developed before Shetty had weaponized it. That information was leverage insurance, and in Butcher's hands, an endgame against every soupy who thought Compound Vive made them untouchable. He checked his gear. Crowbar, naturally. Firearms loaded with rounds designed for enhanced durability targets. And the access codes he'd paid a Vought IT contractor to compromise because security was only as strong as the underpaid employee with gambling debts. Time to go shopping while the store was burning. Across the city in Seven Towers' medical wing, Homelander stood over a dying teammate, starlight hemorrhaging from the virus powers flickering like faulty wiring. The medical staff worked with desperate efficiency, but everyone in the room knew the truth. They had no treatment for this. Compound V enhancement came with no warranty, no recall option, no cure when the product turned hostile. Homelander's face was locked in that perfect, heroic expression. Concerned determination, the mask he wore for cameras. But his hands were shaking. Fists clenched tight enough that leather creaked. Around him, the invincibility he'd built his identity on was collapsing. His team was dying. His supremacy was evaporating in real time. And somewhere out there, weakened but still operational, was the alien who'd beaten him, who'd made him look mortal in front of the entire world, who'd cracked the myth and let the fear leak in. The rage building in Homelander's chest had a target now. Singular focus, the kind of fury that would accept no substitute. In Brooklyn, Lobo felt the contamination working through his system like shrapnel, slowing his regeneration to something merely exceptional instead of instantaneous. Pain was a novelty. He'd experienced it plenty over the centuries, but not recently, not on Earth, where everything was soft and breakable. He laughed, coughing blood because the situation had comedic value. Vought had tried to weaponize him through lab samples, accidentally created a contamination that made their actual weapon viable against him, and now the whole planet was eating itself while he played the role of weakened target. Beautifully incompetent. He told the Brooklyn sky, the news helicopters circling the world, watching him bleed for the first time. This is what you get when you let corporate types play with genocide. The Space Hog's engine coughed. Even his tech was feeling the contamination effects, biological fragments interfacing with mechanical systems in ways that violated several laws of physics. He'd need to withdraw, recalibrate, let his system purge the foreign elements. But first he had a contract to honor. Butcher wanted chaos, wanted Vaught's attention divided. Well, chaos was delivered. The virus was loose soups were dying, and the city was tearing itself apart with the enthusiastic violence Americans brought to every crisis. Time to collect payment and watch the fireworks. He fired up the Space Hog, ignored the protests from his contaminated biology, and headed for the rendezvous point. The contamination would pass. Zarnian regeneration always won, eventually. Just needed time and distance from whatever laboratory nightmare Vought had cooked up. By nightfall, Manhattan looked like a war zone, emergency services overwhelmed, hospitals turning away patients they couldn't treat, soups dying in the streets, while crowds watched with phones raised, documenting the fall of false gods with the same enthusiasm they'd once celebrated their rise. The virus was doing exactly what Cardoza had designed it to do, refined by Shetty's ambition and released by someone with the access to turn theory into mass casualty event. Vaught's insurance policy against superhuman uprising had become the instrument of their potential collapse. And somewhere in the executive suite, someone was running calculations determining whether the company could survive the loss of their product line, whether the liability exceeded the remaining assets, whether bankruptcy and rebrand might be more profitable than continuation. The American way. Always another angle, always another play. The virus continued spreading. The soups continued dying. And the world that had bought the superhero mythology was getting a hard lesson in the difference between marketing and reality. Butcher would leverage it into Vaught's destruction. Homelander would leverage it into permission for violence. Lobo would leverage it into payment and entertainment. And thousands of civilians caught in the machinery of corporate warfare and alien chaos would pay the price in blood and terror and the slow realization that their heroes had always been products, and products could be recalled. The tower's power grid failed at 11:34 p.m., plunging 50 floors of corporate empire into emergency lighting and backup systems that hadn't been stress-tested for simultaneous viral outbreak and infrastructure assault. The blackout wasn't accidental. Butcher had paid good money for the access codes that let him fry the main junction from 3 blocks away. He entered through the underground parking garage crowbar, in hand moving through shadows cast by failing security lights. The building was hemorrhaging personnel executives, evacuating medical staff, overwhelmed security stretched across too many crisis points to maintain proper coverage. Chaos was profitable if you knew how to spend it. The virus storage facility was sub-level 9 behind biometric locks and containment protocols designed for the end of the world. Butcher had the access codes from Chen's stolen data, the biometric hack from a Vought contractor who'd needed rent money more than loyalty, and the confidence of someone with absolutely nothing left to lose. He was halfway to the objective when Homelander found him. The impact came without warning, superhuman speed rage given velocity. Butcher hit a concrete support column hard enough to crack ribs, went down, coughing blood, looked up to see America's hero backlit by emergency lighting like some twisted angel. You. Homelander's voice had lost all pretense of heroism, gone raw with fury. You brought that thing here. That alien. You're the one coordinating this. Butcher grinned through broken teeth. Took you long enough to figure it out. What tipped you off the fact that I'm the only bloke on this continent who hates you enough to burn the whole world down, just to watch you choke? Homelander grabbed him by the throat, lifted him effortless. The laser eyes began their warm-up glow. Give me one reason I shouldn't vaporize you right now. Because, Butcher wheezed, you want to know where Lobo is, and I'm the only one who can tell you. The grip didn't loosen, but the lasers dimmed. Calculation behind the rage. We're coming here, to the tower. We had a deal, him and me. Payments due, and he collects in person. Butcher met those blue eyes, unflinching. You want another shot at him while he's weakened? Let me finish my business, and I'll tell you exactly when he arrives. It was a lie, wrapped in truth. Wrapped in tactical necessity. Homelander didn't need to believe it completely, just needed to want it enough to hesitate. And gods wanted revenge more than mortals ever could. The grip released. Butcher dropped, gasping. You have 10 minutes, Homelander said. Then I'm killing both of you. He vanished in a blur of cape and displaced air, heading topside to wait for prey that was definitely coming. Just not for the reasons Butcher had implied. Butcher picked himself up, ribs screaming, and continued toward sub-level 9. Behind him, Homelander's silhouette was visible through glass and steel, pacing the observation deck like a caged predator, eyes scanning the skyline for approaching threats. The storage facility opened to Chen's credentials, biometric override, and some creative rewiring. Inside the virus repository, strain samples and cryo-storage research data on isolated servers, and the synthesis protocols that would let anyone with adequate resources manufacture genocide in batches. Butcher grabbed it all. Hard drives ripped from terminals, cryo containers designed for field transport documentation that would make Nuremberg prosecutors weep. The weight of it was physical, literal kilos of human extinction packed into a duffel bag that had previously held energy drinks and spare ammunition. He was sealing the bag when the building shook. Topside Lobo had arrived. The space hog punched through the observation deck's reinforced glass at velocity that suggested the alien was done with subtlety. He rolled to his feet, movement slower than his usual fluidity contamination, still degrading his cellular efficiency, and found Homelander waiting with the patience of someone who'd been fantasizing about murder for hours. Round 2, Homelander said and attacked. The fight was ugly. Homelander had speed and aerial superiority. Lobo had durability and weaponry, chain hook whipping through the air firearms that spat rounds designed for tougher targets than flying nationalists. But the contamination was slowing him, wounds healing at rates that were merely superhuman instead of absurd. They tore through the observation deck, shattered the studio where Ashley had filmed. Propaganda crashed into executive offices where quarterly reports burned in fires started by laser vision. The violence had no artistry, just rage and resilience colliding until something broke. Lobo caught Homelander mid-flight, dragged him down through force and momentum, headbutted him hard enough that the American flag imagery on his suit cracked. Blood flew, both of them bleeding now, mutual mortality on display. You're supposed to be invincible. Lobo grinned through the pain, through the contamination burning in his cells. That's the pitch, yeah. The all-American god. Homelander's response was laser vision at point-blank range, cooking flesh that struggled to regenerate, buying seconds of advantage, to mount an assault that would have killed anyone operating under terrestrial biology. But Jarnian's stubbornness exceeded American rage, and Lobo had centuries of practice surviving things that should have been fatal. He took the assault, weathered it, and when Homelander paused to breathe, Lobo's chain hook caught him in the shoulder, punched through the suit's Kevlar weave, and tore. The scream echoed across Midtown. 23 floors below, Butcher heard it and smiled. The distraction was holding. Time to leave. He made it to the garage, to the vehicle he'd stashed with keys under the mat and enough fuel to reach the Canadian border. The duffel bag with the virus went in the passenger seat, handled with the care of someone transporting nitroglycerin and original sin in the same container. The engine turned over. Butcher pulled onto Manhattan streets that looked like war zones. Fires burning abandoned vehicles, the infrastructure of civilization cracking under the weight of too many simultaneous crises. He didn't look back. Topside, the fight was reaching conclusions that satisfied no one. Homelander was hurt, genuinely hurt. Ribs cracked, shoulder torn. The invincibility he'd built his life on revealed as marketing fiction. Lobo was worse. Contamination had progressed to the point where his regeneration was failing in cascades, each wound staying open longer, blood loss becoming actually problematic. They stood in the wreckage of Vought's monument to vertical integration, both broken, both still standing through sheer refusal to quit. "This how it ends," Homelander panted, blood running down his face. "We kill each other in my building." Lobo laughed, wet and painful. "Mate, this ain't ending. This is just the part where I collect payment and fuck off to somewhere less stupid." He tapped his comm unit called the Space Hog. "You wanted to prove you're top dog on this planet. Congratulations. You get to rule the ashes." The bike arrived, hovering despite contamination damage to its systems. Lobo mounted up. Movements careful, the casual invincibility replaced by something more genuine survival through experience rather than immunity. "Tell your handlers," he said to Homelander, to the cameras still recording from news helicopters maintaining safe distance, that the main man's contract is fulfilled. Butcher got what he paid for, and Earth. He grinned, bloody and sincere. Earth's exactly as fucked as it deserves to be. The Space Hog climbed vertical, leaving Homelander standing in the ruins of his tower, his team, his mythology. Below, Manhattan burned with fires that emergency services had stopped trying to contain. The virus continued its work, discriminating and turning Vought's insurance policy into their extinction event. And on the roads heading north, Butcher drove with the virus sample secured, listening to news reports describe the collapse of superhuman hegemony in real time. The cost was catastrophic, thousands dead, society, fracturing martial law being discussed in emergency congressional sessions. But Homelander was broken. The Seven were decimated. Vought was bleeding market cap and literal blood in equal measure. Pyrrhic victory tasted like ashes and copper, and Butcher swallowed it without hesitation. He'd won the virus, lost everything else. That was the deal, and he'd honored it completely. Epilogue. The Pyrrhic Peace Week 1. The virus burned through the superhuman community with discriminating efficiency. Low-tier soups died first, the ones without Vought's premium medical access, the street-level heroes who'd been products of cut-rate Compound V distribution. Hospitals overflowed. Morgues requested federal assistance. Civilian casualties mounted as soups dying, and desperate fought back against the fear with the only tools they had, violence. Week 2. Vigilante justice erupted across major cities. Regular humans, finally seeing their gods bleed, took revenge for years of fear and property damage and casual superiority. The violence was enthusiastic and indiscriminate. Some soups died guilty, many died innocent. The crowds rarely checked credentials before committing murder. Week 3. Vought's stock entered free fall. Emergency board meetings discussed bankruptcy, liquidation, rebranding. Ashley coordinated spin from a bunker, trying to craft narratives around product recalls and unavoidable tragedies. The press releases read like obituaries for American exceptionalism. Week 4. Martial law. Federal troops deployed to major cities, ostensibly to restore order, but actually to protect the remaining soups, the ones wealthy enough, connected enough, or useful enough to warrant government protection. Homelander among them inducted into some new oversight structure that gave him authority and stripped him of autonomy. The irony was noted by everyone except Homelander himself. Month 2. Butcher disappeared completely. The boys scattered trying to minimize civilian casualties. Frenchie and Kimiko running humanitarian aid that governments wouldn't fund Huey processing the trauma in therapy he couldn't afford. The virus samples sat in storage somewhere cold and remote, insurance against the next time heroes forgot they were mortal. Month 3. The new normal established itself. Fewer soups, tighter controls, a population that had learned gods could die and adjusted their worship accordingly. Vought survived in diminished form, their business model pivoting from creation to management of the remaining enhanced population. And somewhere beyond Earth's atmosphere, past lunar orbit and into the black Lobo's space hog, cruised toward the next job. The contamination had cleared Zarnian biology, always won eventually. His payment from Butcher sat secure in accounts that couldn't be traced, frozen, or audited by any terrestrial authority. He'd left Earth wealthier, entertained, and thoroughly convinced that humans were the funniest species in the discovered universe. They'd had gods feared them, loved them, marketed them, and ultimately murdered them with the same weapon they'd created as insurance. Beautifully incompetent from start to finish. The main man powered down his systems, set course for the next contract, and left humanity to sort through the rubble of their own mythology. Behind him, Earth turned in its orbit smaller than ever, dealing with the reality that heroes had always been products, and products could be recalled. The Pyrrhic peace settled like fallout, and civilization learned to live with the taste.